Hello again, everyone, and in this video we're going to take a look at using navigation meshes to create AI. Navigation meshes are a built-in system inside of Unity that allows you to do pathfinding and to create specific situations where your enemy characters can follow you around or go through a set patrol motion and so forth. So we're going to take a look at the basics here, just using some placeholder objects, and eventually move up to having a character that's animated that will have different states where it'll attack us, it'll follow us, and it'll also patrol. And it's all going to be judged on a few things: the navigation mesh, how we program the navigation mesh agent, and also like line of sight and that sort of thing. Now there are a couple of other ways that you could do AI. You can roll your own and kind of program your own AI. This is one of those systems where it's built into the engine, so the resources aren't as intense as if you were to go through and try to build your own AI system. So this is just one example of how you can get some sort of pathfinding in AI to work, but there's also A-star pathfinding and a couple of other methods out there that you could use as well. So to start this off, we're going to set up a new scene to create some AI. So I'm going to go into our scenes folder here and create a new scene file. So I'm going to go to new scene, create a scene here, and I'm going to call it nav mesh. And I got this folder here that I don't need anymore. It was from a test I had done earlier. Okay, so let's open up that scene that we created. And the first thing I'm going to do is create something for our navigation mesh to run around on. And this could run around on terrain. It can run around the 3D objects that you create using ProBuilder or 3ds Max or Maya, or just the plain old primitive objects, which is what we're going to use in this example here. So I'm going to go to the hierarchy and create a plane. And I'm going to scale this up to make it a bit bigger for us to be able to run around on. And make sure it's in the middle of your scene at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to take the main camera for now for this example and just align it with my view. So I'm going to go to game object and align with line view it's selected. So we're going to want the camera, game object, and align with view. So we get a view of our overall plane here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a couple of objects here. The first one is going to be the thing that's being controlled by the nav mesh, and this would be called the nav mesh agent. So I'm just going to call this cube agent. And I'm also going to just duplicate this one and call this one that we duplicated target. And I'm going to move these apart from one another. I'm going to give them some different materials. So we've got these pre-built materials we made earlier. Red I'll make the target, and green I will make the agent. I could zoom in, we could take a better look here. And I have my lighting turned off in the scene. I'll turn it back on so you can see it. Alright, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to set up this agent to run around on this plane, and it's going to have boundaries. And it's going to follow the target, and this target could be our player, it could be other enemies in the scene, it could be a variety of different things. And basically what that target is an attractor that will make the agent move towards it. So to get this started, the first thing we're going to do is grab the agent, and we're going to add to the agent a component called nav mesh agent. So we'll type in nav and nav mesh agent comes up here. So we have a nav mesh agent, and this has all of the different controls and parameters for editing how this thing is going to move inside of our scene. So now that we have that, what we can do now is create our nav mesh. So nav meshes are the meshes that we can walk on with our agents inside of our scene. And for these agents to be able to walk on it, they have to be baked. So what we could do is we're going to end up setting obstacles up that can move around here. That when this cube comes up to it, he'll walk around it and such using these nav meshes. So to make something a nav mesh, it needs to be defined as static. And you can see the static value up here in the inspector in the upper right hand corner. If I click the little drop down arrow, maybe not the drop down arrow next to it, yeah, the drop down arrow next to it, you'll see that there's a bunch of different types of static that we can create. Occlude static, occluder static, contribute GI. Those are all things that have to do with the rendering, the lighting inside of the scene. Navigation static is the one that we want. Off mesh link generation allows us to also create off mesh links where our agent will be able to jump from one mesh to another. So in this particular situation, we're just going to click navigation static. Okay, and you'll see a little dash goes in there because only one static object or only one static option would be selected. So if I go back here, just navigation static, see how it's a dash. If I click the little arrow here, it shows up there. Alright, so once that is done, what we can do is bake the navigation mesh. So to bake the navigation mesh, we need another panel up here that's not on the editor by default. So if you go up to Window, there is this option for AI inside of the Window dropdown, and then you're going to select Navigation. And once you select Navigation, you should get a panel there. I usually dock mine over here behind the inspector so that I could tab between both of these. And when you have the navigation open, you'll see that there's a menu that pops up that will allow you to be able to see the navigation mesh inside of the scene view. Alright, so there's a couple of different tabs here in the navigation menu. There's the agent. The agent basically defines the performance of how this thing is going to move through the scene. It's very similar to your character controller where it's how tall it is, what its radius is, what's the maximum step height hit as, what's the maximum angle it can walk up at. And you can change all these just like within your character controller for your any agent that's standing on top of that mesh. Areas allows you to define different areas of the mesh as walkable, jumpable, or to have different transitions between. And they all have this cost which incurs, which basically if they're presented with two at the same time, it will pick one over the other. Bake has a lot of the same parameters as the agent. It just basically puts all of these panels together so that you have to jump back and forth pretty much. And in this panel is where you actually bake the mesh. And then the last thing would be the object. Has filters for what the object would be, if it's a terrain, if it's a mesh. In this particular situation, we're doing all types of objects. And it'll automatically set things to static when you create it. And if you have this checked off, it'll automatically make it a nav mesh link. And as far as the navigation areas, they show up here. And this will define what type of area it is. So I'll go back to bake here. I've got the plane selected and I'm going to hit bake, and you'll see that what will happen here is this blue plane will show up on top of your mesh, and you'll also see that there's a little bit of area that's not covered in blue. So that's the maximum area that this agent will walk to before it walks to the edge. So if I move this target off to the side here, what will end up happening is it'll only move up to this blue edge. It won't move to the actual edge, and that's to help it keep it from falling off things like platforms and so forth. Alright, so we have this created. We have the plane baked as a navigation mesh. We have a target and we have an agent. Now we're ready to write a script to tell this thing to point at the target and move towards them. So we'll go into the scripts folder here, and what I'll do is create a new script. And I'm going to call this basic nav agent. And we'll open this up in Visual Studio. Alright, so there's a couple of things that we need when scripting a navigation mesh. The first thing would be in the namespace. We need to tell the Unity engine that we're using the navigation meshes. And this namespace is using Unity engine .ai, and that'll give us all of the different API that we need to access the nav mesh agent. So if I jump in here and say nav, you'll see it comes up with a whole bunch of different options here. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is create a public value here, and this is going to be for nav mesh agent, and we'll call this agent. Next, we'll create another public value here, and this is going to be for a game object. This game object is going to be our target. Okay, so inside of the start function here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the nav mesh agent component, because this script is going to be on anything that's like an enemy or nav mesh agent that's inside of the scene. So here inside of the start function, I'll say agent equals, and it's going to be a get component nav mesh agent. Alright, now in the update function, we're going to point our nav mesh agent at the target. So we'll say agent.destination, which is a built-in function of the AI class that we imported. And we'll say equals public, actually I'm not, sorry, public player dot transform, not player controller, sorry, target dot transform, target dot transform dot position. So what that's going to do, the target.transform position, is it's going to tell the agent to move to wherever the player is, and it won't stop moving until it reaches its destination. So we should be able to save this and head back over to Unity. And if I select the agent, jump over to the inspector here, we should be able to drag this script onto him. So I'll select the basic nav agent, drop it onto the agent, and we should have a couple of variables here. For some reason it's not revealing them. Looks like it didn't save it. There we go. Alright, so now it should show up here. So now I've got agent, and I've also got target. So agent we're not going to need to define. That should define on its own from the start function, but the target we will. So I'm going to drag and drop the target here. And I'm going to select the target, and I'm going to move it a little bit further away from where he's located at the moment. Okay, so if I hit the play button, we should see our agent moving towards our target. And if I move him around, see how he stops when he gets there? And if I move him around, we'll see him move around. Oops, I moved the agent instead of the target. So all of his movements, right? The speed that he turns at, the speed that he moves towards us, the direction he's facing in, those are all handled in the agent's parameters. So I'm going to select the agent briefly here. And we'll take a look at some of his parameters here. So he's got speed. So if I increase speed to something like 10, and then grab my target and move it away, we'll see he moves a lot faster now. But his turning doesn't really match up. It's real slow, right? So what we could do is select the agent, and we should have this thing here. We've got angular speed, steering speed, angular speed, obstacle avoidance. So let's try angular speed. Let's increase this to something like 500. And now move him. Oh, I moved the target again. So if I grab the, I move the agent instead of the target, I meant. So I'll move him out here. You should see that he starts to move a lot quicker. Stopping distance is how far he'll stop away. So if I write 5 and then move him here, he should be stopping 5 away, 5 meters away. Let's try 2. Then move our target. Oh, he's moving right to us for some reason. Maybe some of these values aren't updating instantly. Try this again. Jump into agents. Should reset all of his values because you're editing him in play mode. So I'm going to set the stopping distance to 2 and hit play. And he should approach us and eventually stop 2 meters away. So see, now he's not on top of us like he was before. If I come in here, I'll increase his speed again. Increase it to 10. And this time I'll change the stopping distance to 5. Hit the play button. See that he comes 5. Oh, did I set it right? 5 might be too much. Let's set it to 4. And hit play now. Oh, he's running right on top of me now. Why is it doing that? Worked that first time, but not this time. Try it again at 2. Huh. Now it doesn't seem to be changing back. Let's change his speed here to 5. Maybe it has something to do with the speed. Maybe not. Huh. Worked that first time when he was set to 3.5. We'll try this one more time. So speed to 3.5. And then the stopping distance to 2. I have the agent selected. Now he stops. What if I increase it now to 5, but leave the speed the same? Because I think what we did was we cranked up the speed before. And not the distance. Yeah, so it has something to do with the speed. Maybe what's happening is it's missing that check when it sets that distance. But we can also do that through code as well to check what that stopping distance is. Alright, so that's a little bit of an overview of just the different functions of the navigation mesh agent. And remember, you can always click these little question marks here to bring up any additional information about these different parameters in the scripting documentation. But let's take a look at a couple other things. What about obstacles if we want to create an obstacle? So I'm going to create another object. I'm going to create a cube. And I'm going to pull this cube around here. And I'm going to scale it up a bit. So I'm going to use the scale tool. Scale it this way. Scale it up this way. Maybe rotate it a bit like this. And have it so it's right in between both the target and the agent. Okay. So when you create obstacles, you have to rebake your mesh. And the obstacles also need to be set to navigation static. Okay. So what we can then do is select the plane and jump back into our navigation menu here. And if I go back and rebake this, you'll see that it creates this area around this object that our agent can no longer walk to. So if it sees that we are on the other side of this wall, it's going to tell the agent to walk around the wall. So if I hit the play button, agent should come through, come around, and come see us. Alright, now if I take the target, move it to the other side of the wall, does the same thing. And if the target keeps moving, our agent will keep changing direction to figure out what's the quickest path to get to him. So you see I'm just kind of teasing him now. Pretty neat though, right? So this is how we're going to create some basic AI within the engine. We're also going to set this up so it works in coordination with the animation system to play 3D animations as well. What I think we're going to do is we're going to set up a basic shooting mechanic so that we could shoot this cube, deal damage to it, and then what we'll do is we'll add animations and states, a state machine to our enemy so that he'll be able to attack us back. Alright, so that's the basics on navigation meshes, and I'll see you in the next video.